Welcome to the Linguava podcast, The Invisible Profession, where we give you tools, tips, and resources in medical interpretation and translation that help bring to life our industry and ultimately help improve health outcomes for the limited English proficient communities. Welcome everyone to our episode number 9, numero 9, here on our Linguava podcast, The Invisible Profession. And we are all in for a big treat today because we have an amazing guest, and her name is Darinka Mangino, who's coming to us straight from Mexico City this morning. She has an incredible resume that I'm going to share just a little bit to do it justice, but I won't be able to share all of it because we would be here for just a little bit too long reading it all. But she is a conference and court interpreter for Spanish, English, and French. She holds a master's in advanced studies for interpreting trainers from the University of Geneva, Switzerland, and a PGC in forensic linguistics from Aston University. She also is a member of the International Association of Conference Interpreters and the Mexican Translators Association. Something very interesting about her that we'll be unpacking as well is she has served as the personal interpreter of 3 presidents of Mexico and is hired by several international organizations like the UN and the OAS. So it is a huge honor to have Darinka on the show this morning. Darinka, thanks for joining us all the way from Mexico City.
Thank you, David. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with your audience, with colleagues, and I'm very happy to be here and share a little bit of my experience.
And we would love to hear a little bit about your story as such a accomplished and professional interpreter, interpreting for 3 different presidents of Mexico. How did you get started as an interpreter?
My story as a professional interpreter began almost 25 years ago, 24 to be precise. But my actual training as an interpreter, I guess it started the day one when I was born. And during these days of confinement, I have had a lot of time to reflect exactly where certain skills came from. And I think that I could share with you a bit of that to understand what were the experiences that made it possible that I could pair the values and the passion for language that I learned in my early years with the skills and training you get in the university. When I was born, my parents decided to make an experiment. So my mother would speak Spanish to me. My father would speak English to me. They were both Mexicans. So they were not, my father was not a native speaker of English. So they did that experiment for a while where I was exposed to 2 different languages from a very early age. So I realized that at a very early age that languages are tools and languages are part of your identity. So my grandfather could speak German and he could speak Mayan because his mother was a Mayan woman from Guatemala, but he decided not to. So it was a big question that just got stuck in the back of my mind, like, what? Oh, can I speak another language? Can I decide which one to speak and which other language not to speak?
You know, it's funny hearing your story and talking about just that curiosity and that interest and passion for languages. And I hadn't really even thought about it that way for me as to why I got started in interpreting. I was always enamored with the ability of the skill of interpretation. It was very, very challenging at first, just like it would be for anyone. But now that you mention that, I think about the fact that I was always drawn to idioms and just how language works. And I think that there's something there for us as interpreters that we're drawn to language in a sort of a unique way, not just simply learning languages, which is great, but of course that doesn't make you an interpreter, right? So I think that there's something there to like really being drawn to more of what's behind the curtain with languages. And
exactly. And I always like to define how important languages are for interpreting as having a vehicle. So you can have a car, a very nice car, and languages are the gasoline that you put into the car, but to make it work, you need a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, I was exposed to different cultures, even in my own family. Well, my parents got divorced, so I spent a lot of time with my mother's family, but just visiting my father's family was a completely different culture. And on his side, I was in close contact with a lot of artists as well. So it was a very interesting way to see, okay, we're all Mexicans, but I am seeing two different cultures. They don't use the same words. They don't laugh about the same things. So I was somehow, well, if I use the word forced to be neutral or somehow as an observer of these two realities, it's a very strong word to say forced. But when you are little, well, you are in the world of adults and you cannot make a lot of decisions. So I somehow saw that you can use, that language is not only words. For example, the art that I was in contact with was video art. My father's wife was the first woman to bring video art to Mexico. So it was a complete novelty. So I realized that you can express through images a lot, and some expressions in language, and I think of many images that can describe how the Mexican culture works are very vivid. So the way you can add knowledge, image, and emotion into what you want to communicate and expressing it by choosing the right words, it was fascinating to me from the beginning. Understanding the culture of the language that you're speaking is essential to be an interpreter. And sometimes when we live in a country, for example, in Mexico, I need to make an extra effort to understand the culture of the US, for example, the culture of the UK, the culture of Australia, because we get all of those varieties of English here. In your case, you get all the varieties of Spanish, for example. When you hire a Spanish interpreter, well, you hope that the user of that service comes from the same country, because otherwise you would sometimes feel that they are speaking Greek to you, because it's you don't know the culture. So speaking a language, yes, it helps. But if you don't understand the culture, you are lost.
That's so important. When you're going into any sort of an assignment for interpretation, knowing ahead of time what that organization is and then who you're going to be interpreting for and where they're from is not always information that's available to us as interpreters, but extremely important, especially depending on the type of assignment. It is a skill and a challenge, and I've talked with a lot of interpreters that have tried to learn simultaneous and not been successful or not felt comfortable to that level. So what would be your advice for some of those interpreters who are wanting to, maybe they are able to do consecutive well and they feel comfortable and confident there? How do they make that big step to being able to get the level of competence and training and confidence in simultaneous interpreter? What would be your advice for them?
Of course. Well, practice makes perfect. So we have to practice and practice and practice until certain skills become automatic. And by this, I mean being able to listen, speak, think, decide, choose, watch what is going on in front of you, use your glossary, and communicate with your colleagues. So there are many things that are needed to perform in simultaneous interpretation. So what happens is that most of the times we see the outcome. You see someone just clicking the on button on a console and they start speaking, and you only see them speaking in a different language and listening in a different language. So in between, there is a lot that goes on. But we need to step back certain steps in order to begin understanding what is needed in every time that a speaker comes to the floor and shares a speech, for example. So if an interpreter only practices simultaneous interpreting, just turning on the TV and shadowing in English what they listen, or they just start interpreting what they hear from the radio, Of course, it will help you get comfortable with having two sound inputs at the same time. But we are missing a lot in terms of what communication is. So a simultaneous interpreter is saying in a different language what the speaker is just said in a different language. So we need to understand first, who is the speaker? What is the purpose of that speaking, sharing an idea, a comment, whatever it is, with their audience or the person in front of them. So first of all, I would advise people to understand communication and the role of the interpreter in that exchange. Another advice would be to understand your language, know it very well, and understand how people communicate ideas in their own cultures, because every organization will have their own format. And in conferences, for example, we get a lot of delegates, we get a lot of speakers that would speak in very formal terms and according to the rules of specific situations, like the UN Assembly, for example, a welcome address from a president, for example. There are rules. There are very specific rules that sometimes newcomers to the profession, they are not aware of all of those protocols that speakers of a language in a specific context have to comply with. So if you're not aware of that, it's very likely that you are going to make the wrong choices. And the best example is what happens in court. So there are many rules. You don't know the rules, you won't be able to understand a thing. We call ourselves interpreters, but we don't do the same work. And if you usually work in courts and then you are offered a job for a specialized conference, if you don't have the right skills, it might be very likely that you would run into trouble. And the same thing for a conference interpreter if they are asked to interpret in a hearing. And, we both have the skills. It doesn't matter if it's simultaneous, consecutive, side translation. We all do the same, but these realities are very different. And the way the information is presented is very different. So that when people decide to move from one area of specialization to the other, well, sometimes they are unaware of how different communication is. And for aspiring interpreters, for example, we all want to be UN interpreters. Well, that is a specific field that requires a specific skills that you won't have to use in court, for example. There you need other skills. So, well, of course, if you work for the international court, it would be similar, but the crimes are different. So you need to adapt depending on the area where you envision to work in the future. But it's not easy to jump from one setting to the other without the right training and with the right awareness of the rules and the ethics, because that is also a very important component of professional interpretation.
Yeah, and one thing as far as preparation, relating this even to the medical field, when you're thinking about taking an assignment that could be that oncology is going to be very different than going to the dentist, interpreting for someone getting a tooth extraction, or physical therapy appointment, or someone who's having a heart condition. So knowing that information and following something similar, are you going to a hospital? Are you going to a clinic? What's the department that you're going to? Knowing that is extremely important. And I'm a big advocate for all of us as language service providers to make sure that we are doing our part in sharing that information and providing that information to all of our interpreters before they go to an assignment. So then that way, if they're going to, let's say, the leukemia appointment, that they're able to be extra versed in that terminology before showing up and having to feel like you're scrambling.
Exactly. And when it comes to technical terms, those are words that you've never heard, you've never used. And acquiring language and using new words require a long time. Well, we can see it when kids learn to speak.
Yeah.
Well, they start articulating phrases after 2 or 3 years of practice. So we need tools. And it's possible. We interpreters are very adaptable. I can learn well on average every time I have a new topic, in my assignments. On average, I research over 300 terms. So that's how
You
big
mean
the
you don't know every word already in the entire in every language? You're not a human dictionary. I think a lot of
not yet.
times I think a lot of times, and I want to pivot here to another topic, talking about limitations as interpreters. We are humans. We are not human dictionaries. We are not calculators. We do not know every term, word. So, and I think that that's really important to be real about, because sometimes as an interpreter, when we're asking for a clarification on a term that maybe we have not heard before, we're not familiar with, we didn't quite hear, or we want to make sure before we just assume. We think we might know what that term is, but we don't want to assume. How do you, as a conference interpreter, with so much at stake of different people's speaking tone, their speed, their accent, the volume in which they're speaking, or maybe even the volume that you have access to. So if you're in a booth, what is that volume level? How close are they to the microphone? How much do you have access to be able to ask that question, for them to speak louder, speak closer to the microphone? So when things go wrong, as they can sometimes, Murphy's Law,
Mhm.
what is a simultaneous interpreter able to do when it comes to correcting themselves? If a mistake is made, how are we able to adequately try to correct that? And when do we not have the opportunity to, and we have to just move on?
In conference interpreting, we have the benefit of stepping into the shoulders of the colleagues who were here before us and created this profession. So they did a very good job in setting the rules in terms of informing organizations what were the needs of interpreters. So most of those rules and those practices are well established. So if you watch videos of the United Nations, you see that they use very specific microphones, and you can only have one voice at the same time. So in terms of the minimum working conditions, I believe that in general, there is a lot of ground that we have achieved, and the rules are understood by public speakers, because as public speakers, they just want to be heard, and they know that microphones are tools. So we tend to work with very experienced people in terms of communicating before an audience. So you might get in specialized conferences people who are not that experienced, they are nervous, and they might want to talk very fast because the only thing they want is to step down and do something else, but presenting a paper. So we might get something of that sort more often. But in general, technicians, which are part of the team in conference interpreting, it's their job to take care of that. Well, that is speaking in general. We see that meetings are changing in format, for example. So we tend to have faster speakers because you only have 2 hours, and you need to have all delegates speak, or the people who have to present in a briefing session. So that can be an obstacle. But in terms of what we do in conference interpreting, we don't have a record that is all the time overseeing what we do. And there are different rules that you do find in medical interpreting and in court. So our job is to enable communication and present communication in a way that it is understandable. So we have a little bit more room of shaping the message in a way that the listeners of the message can digest easily.
Yeah.
And in court, you have to be there. You can't even take away the ums and the hums and the all of those particles of communication that have a specific role. In court, they are assessing the witness's credibility. In conference interpreting, it is about spreading knowledge, spreading ideas, and that gives us an opportunity to tweak a little bit the message in terms of shape, not in terms of substance.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, we have more space, but at the same time, we need more knowledge of different fields in order to do that, because in conferences, we might sometimes omit information for the sake of communication. It's not taking information out because we don't know how to say that in the other language. That if you don't know how to say something in the other languages because you didn't prepare, probably your mastery of the language is not good enough. But there are choices that are valid in this field, and this is something that you can't do in other settings. For my what I know about medical interpreting in community settings is that you serve more as a mediator, and you have other roles. You interpret, but you can add information, you can contribute to prevent any misunderstanding, because there's liability, and doctors have certain responsibilities that get them to court if they don't comply with that.
As long as that's done so with clarifying language, and there are times where you step out of that conduit role and you become the cultural broker or clarifier or even advocate at some situations where someone may be at harm. We're getting close to our time here. There's so many questions that I still have, but I'm gonna leave it to one more. And then before I get to that question though, too, I want to make sure that everyone here in our podcast community has the ability to, if they did want to get in touch with you, maybe a follow-up question for you directly. What's the best way people can get in touch with you? LinkedIn or email or?
Thank you. Yes. I use several social networks. I'm on LinkedIn. Look for Darinka Mangino. On Twitter at DMW_interpreter. I'm on Facebook as well, Darinka Mangino. And my website, well, actually, I have 3 projects. So the way you can contact me is www.lexica.solutions. That's my own personal project for on-demand courses, personal coaching, and some other trainings that I offer that cover court interpreting, conference, and well, I also get contacted by associations to design specific courses, so you'll find a wide variety there. I also am part of a collective. It's recently created, Proyecto Sensontle, which is www.proyecto with a Y in Spanish. Sensontle, that's a Nahuatl word. So it's CENZONTLE.com. We never thought that how difficult that would be to share internationally, because most of the courses that you'll find there are specific for the needs of Mexico, which is it's a market that has very different needs. So we basically offer courses for Mexico, or whomever is interested in learning more about Mexico and how we work in Mexico. That's another place. And I also have another project with my dear colleague Maha Al-Medwali, and we design and offer courses to hone your skills in the use of technology and interpreting, basically Kai tools. And with all of the changes that the pandemic brought along, we share trainings on how to interpret using Zoom and many other options.
That's excellent. Well, and that's a great resource. I encourage anyone that's interested to reach out. And as we know from our very own Grace, who just speaks volumes and raves about your training courses. So
thank you very much.
We know that directly from experience. So, and we'll make sure and put all your information on the video, as well as any posts that we do, so people can can be able to get in touch with you, Darinka.
Thank
And
you very much.
my last question for you here before we close is you've dedicated so many years, 25 years to interpretation and to bridging the gap and really helping making sure that the communication is had. What is, if you had to say in one phrase or one word or one short phrase, what is it that drives you to be the best interpreter you can be?
A service. I would say that having the possibility of being someone else's voice is a huge responsibility, and I take it very seriously. So in every job, I try to be the best version of my professional self. So, and that requires a lifestyle. So I try to keep my skills up and running. Yeah. And I try to learn as much as I can from every field to feel confident that I can be up to the task, because if you cannot feel that you're ever ready for everything in interpreting. So I like to take that responsibility very, very seriously. So that would be the phrase.
I love that, service. And from talking with you, it's very clear that you have that servanthood leadership, that heart of a servant to be able to lead and really give back to the community in so many different countries and presidents that you've been able to help service. So we thank you for all of your service that you're doing. Thank you for the example that you've been to so many of us interpreters that are learning and coming up, and we will continue cheering for you in all of your endeavors and trainings. And again, we just encourage everyone to take a moment and check out Darinka's trainings online. Check out her site and be able to connect with her, because she is an amazing trainer, and we know that from experience. And we want to just thank everyone for tuning into our episode number 9 here. If there was a question that you have for us from this conversation, go ahead and pop that into the comments. If there's a topic that you'd love for us to share about in an upcoming episode, we'd love to hear that as well. And also, if you haven't already, take a moment and hit like and subscribe to the podcast, so that we know that you're enjoying it, and feel free to share it with your community and networks, so that they can also get the same content as well. So Darinka, again, thank you so much for joining us today.
On the contrary, David, it has been a pleasure. From the moment I got your email and in preparation for this interview, I have to congratulate you, because you are very organized, and all the information that I received, I've been interviewed in many occasions, but you have a very, very unique style. So thank you for that opportunity to prepare in advance. And thank you for this opportunity to meet your colleagues, and for sharing a little bit of my view of interpreting. So thank you. I appreciate this opportunity, and good luck with every Linguava interpreter's endeavor. And I hope to see you in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Darinka. It was honestly our pleasure. And we'll definitely be talking soon, and look forward to connecting again.